All right, we got a new project here for the shop. So this is a 2019 850 Polaris Sportsman. So story on this one, I paid 2,000 bucks for it, which it does run and drive, but it is stuck in gear. We're stuck in high gear right now. If I go and try to move the shifter, we got nothing. If we look back over here, so something is broken down in this transmission. So we're gonna pull this transmission out of here, see what's wrong with it, and get this thing fixed. It does run. Motor sounds fine. It does have 11,000 miles on it. Story on this one is it came from a feedlot. I've actually kind of sold and bought a few of them from these guys, and they typically run them pretty hard, but for this price, I couldn't really pass it up. I think four-wheelers new are about 11,000 up to 12,000 or so for this specific model. I think if I get this transmission fixed, should still be a $5,000 four-wheeler pretty easy. Okay, let's get this thing on the lift and start tearing it apart. Plastics and footwells are all off and out of the way. Next step, we pull this muffler off and out of the way. We do need to remove this front drive shaft, so we'll have to pop off the U-joint up there too. That will slide forward and out of the way. Pull this rear U-joint off. We'll also pull the clutch cover off. Just get that out of the way. Just have a little bit more room to slide this thing out. And then basically this transmission, there's a couple engine mounts down here, and we'll start pulling all those bolts out and everything and pull this transmission out of here. Pulled the tires off this quick. To remove the clutch on these, you got to pull a tire off and then pull this bracket off. Allows you to get to all these bolts, and this clutch cover will slide off from the side. If you pull both tires off, it's really easy to get access to everything. So we'll pull this clutch cover off next. I'm also going to pull the clutches off of it as well, just so they're off and out of the way. So when this thing slips out, one less thing to hold on to. Clutch cover's off. I think I changed my mind. I'm going to leave these clutches on there for now. It should slide out this way just fine and not interfere. And then I'll pull those off once I get the transmission out. So next step right now is we're going to work on these U-joints. This muffler, honestly, I think I can leave this in place. To remove it, it's just removing these nuts there and then a couple spring clamps back here, but sometimes those nuts kind of suck to remove, so they get kind of rusted on there, and the transmission should all go out that way. Shouldn't interfere. So we're going to pull these U-joints off here. So on this backside, there's just some Allen head bolts for those. Should be able to pull those off. This shaft will slide forward a little bit, and that will come off. And then this guy here, what we're going to have to do, up on this front U-joint right here, there's a pin that goes in there. We'll drive that out with a punch and a hammer, and then this shaft should slide forward enough that this whole thing will kind of slide off once we get this transmission loosened up. Then to remove the transmission, there's a bolt or rubber mount here on each side, and then basically, let's see how to get in there. Like up here, there's I think about 6 bolts or so, kind of all the way around. Another one right there, some 13mm head bolts. That bolt into the motor, remove that, and then this transmission will slide backwards and out. Okay, so far this is going pretty smooth. This shaft popped off pretty easy. I've had some of these in the past where this spline's at, they've seized onto here before, and I've had to cut this whole joint off just to get them off. Luckily, popped the front U-joint out, and this thing slid nice and free. And now on the back side, removed 4 bolts holding this U-joint on, and then this one will slide back off down this way. Basically, got those off. I guess I just need to unhook my linkage here quick and then start doing the transmission bolt mounts, and this thing should be about ready to pull out. Okay, I've got all my bolts loose on this transmission. I've got it starting to move back a little bit. In theory, this guy should slide right out. So let's see if it does it. Oh, there it's going. And out it goes. There it is. All right, it's out. This is the transmission. So this is a little coupler side. This is what's going into the motor. This is where it attached around. There was those 6 bolts there. And then a couple rubber mounted mounts as well. So what we're gonna do next here, we're gonna pull these clutches off, and then this cover is gonna come off, and then we'll be able to split this case and pop it open and see what is broken inside this thing. Pull this clutch off. So this drive bolt on the primary clutch is left-handed threads. So we're gonna go right to tighten or to loosen this up. Throw our puller down the hole. The impact should pop right off. Just like that. Primary clutch, belt. For 11,000 miles on this thing, this belt looks great. Curious if it's still the original. It might be. Secondary clutch. Just slides off the spline shaft. Set that off to the side. Okay, so got some torque screws around here on the inside. We're gonna zip those off quick. Okay, I think I got them all. This is kind of siliconed on there too. So when we put it back on, we'll re-silicone that as well. Okay, clutch covers off. Now we can split this transmission case. Pry in there, and it's going. Okay, there's our cover. And there's our problem. Right there. See this little shift fork down there? It's broken. You can see right there where it's broken, it's supposed to be attached to this little collar right here. That's what helps shift it in gear and stuff. So we'll pull some of these gears out of the way there to get to this gear change mechanism, and then we'll probably just get a new shift fork for this thing, and that should be the fix. Okay, this is what ended up breaking. So this little plate is supposed to be like that, attached there and there, and so this actuates all the little shift drums and stuff, and so that snapped. So we'll get a new one of these and put this transmission back together. So it should be a pretty easy fix to it. Okay, my new piece is in there. This is that little cam gear that broke. There are a couple little timing marks on here, and there's another gear down below, so you gotta time those things back up so that when you spin this guy, everything shifts the way it's supposed to. So we're going to drop these gears back down in there, and then we'll line up our little shift drums and some pins, and then we'll kind of actuate it and see if it shifts the way it's supposed to. The transmission is back together. We got all of our gears back in place. Now it's time to put this cover back on, so we're going to reseal it using some Moto Seal here. Pretty much any silicone sealant will work just fine, whatever color you like. I always seem to use the gray Moto Seal stuff just because that's what was usually used on this to begin with. Just give this a good coat all the way around. All the gears inside here looked perfectly fine. All the bearings seem nice and smooth. So really, the only issue we had was that broken shift cam. Okay, got a good layer there on everything. So we'll slide this case back on. Alrighty, looks like everything's seated down. We'll run all of our screws back in. Everything's back together, case is tightened down. Right now we're in high gear, so if I'm spinning my clutch, we're spinning down here on both the shafts. Shift this back one notch. Should be low gear, spinning slower. Next one should be neutral. Nothing, so neutral. Then we got reverse. There's reverse, and then the last one's park. And there's park. So everything's working in the transmission. So we'll put these clutches back on, throw this thing back in there, and we should have a driver again. So I made a little mistake when I was putting this back together. Well, actually, I made a mistake when I pulled it apart. So when I pulled this primary clutch off, this puller that I use, I've got a handful of different pullers, but this one, normally this part slips down in between the threads and hits on the crankshaft and pops off. This puller I grabbed a little bit bigger thread or stud there. When it dropped down in here, it pushed on the threads itself and kind of boogered up those threads down inside there, so my bolt wouldn't start. And this is a 12 millimeter left-handed thread. I can't find a tap in town or anything, so what I ended up doing was picking up a drill bit that was just a hair bigger than the 12 millimeter, and then I drilled down in there, just basically cut off the first 2 or 3 threads, and now my bolt's able to start again. So I'm gonna get back to putting this primary clutch on and then throw this transmission back in place. Transmission is set back in place, so now this spline shaft couples into the crankshaft right there. It's kind of unique thing with the 850 Sportsmans is that the primary clutch does not go directly onto the crankshaft. In the past, I've actually had one of these transmissions where this coupler shaft broke, where the motor would start and run perfectly and the clutch just wouldn't spin at all. But spin that there. Okay, so we'll put that back together and then run all these bolts back in place and snug this transmission back up. Transmission is all in place. Got the rear U-joint hooked up, front one's still unhooked. We're in neutral right now. Nothing. Let's go to low gear. There's low gear. We're spinning. Let's go to high gear. Okay, let's go to reverse. There we got reverse and park and park. Okay, we got a working transmission. Let's button this thing up and take it for a drive. It is all back together. So, moment of truth. Let's go for a drive. Okay, reverse. We're moving. Try low gear. Low gear. Go to high gear. Let's go down the road. Everything feels really good. Everything sounds normal. These 850s are by far my favorite four-wheeler. There's nothing that rides smoother than these things. All right, so a little recap. So paid $2,000 for this 2019 850 Sportsman. It did run, does have 11,000 miles on it, but it was stuck in gear. So pulled the transmission out of it, figured out basically the little cam mechanism in the transmission was broken for the shift drum. Put that back together, fix all the transmission issues. The part was maybe $100. Probably got about 6 hours into it right now. Should be able to post this thing for about $5,000, so should be a pretty good profit for that amount of hours. All right, well, please subscribe, stay tuned for the next one. Definitely some more projects like this, as well as some vintage stuff to come.